Hi everyone, my name is Debora from Sedition College Sunada, and today's topic is Important Acts of Media Laws, which is for the second semester students, and the paper is CC4. Let's begin. Media laws can be defined as laws that regulate the activities of the media. These are the legal boundaries which affect what one can and cannot publish. It gives us the knowledge of law and legal proceedings and how it works. It is with the help of media laws that we can know about the offences journalists may commit while carrying out their work and know the professional bodies charged with duty of regulating media, and also know about the rights and obligations of media. Now, legislation is a law which has been enacted by a legislature or other governing body. And Indian media is among one of the oldest and largest media of the world. And most of the times, Indian media has been free, but its freedom comes along with some restrictions. So, some of the important legislation or the laws which are related to media are as follows. Firstly, to begin with, the first Press Regulation Act, which was of 1799, and it was enacted by Lord Wellesley during the British rule in India. Now, according to this act, every printer of a newspaper was required to print his name at the bottom of the paper, and every editor and proprietor of a newspaper was required to provide his name and address to the Secretary of Censorship. No paper was to be published unless and until it had been inspected by the Secretary to the government. And the penalty for violating any of the rules was deportation to Europe. These rules were referred to as the Wellesley Regulation, which had impacted the growth of free press for almost 2 decades. They can thus be described as the forerunners of efforts made by the British rulers in order to muzzle the press in India. Moving on to the second type of media law, that is the Licensing Regulations Act of 1823. This act was enacted by John Adams, the then acting Governor General. According to this regulation, press without license was a penal offence. So, every publisher was expected by this act to get a license from the government. It also had the right to cancel the license of any publisher. Any defaulter was punished therefore with a fine of rupees 400, and press would be seized by the government. These restrictions were directed chiefly against the Indian language newspapers or those edited by the Indians. Then comes the Press Act of 1835 or the Metcalfe Act. Metcalfe had repealed the obnoxious 1823 ordinance and was named as the liberator of the Indian press. Fourthly comes the Press and Registration of Books Act 1867. Now this is another act which had actually relaxed the restrictions put by the Metcalfe Act of 1835, and hence was stated that government actually has to act as the regulatory body and not a restrictive body. Yes. So this was enacted with a view in order to evaluate the position of the books, newspapers and magazines in the country from time to time. Now another famous act is the Sedition Act, which comes under section 124A of the IPC, that is the Indian Penal Code. This act was introduced by the British colonial government in the year 1870s, which said that the act of sedition, which defined the sedition. The act of sedition is to bring about hatred or contempt towards the government, established by the law in India. In this case, the punishment may be imprisonment for a lifetime and fine, or either imprisonment for 3 years and fine. And this was actually brought about in order to suppress the freedom struggle which was prevalent then. Now, there are 5 different types of sedition, and these sedition depends upon the objective of the accused. And first type of sedition is exciting disaffection against the king, government, constitution, parliament, or administration of justice. B. Promoting any alteration in church or state by unlawful means. C. Inciting disturbance of the peace. D. Raising discontent among the king's subject. And the last type of sedition is exciting class hatred. Moving on to another type of act, that is the Vernacular Press Act of 1878. This act of British India was enacted in order to curtail the freedom of the Indian language press particularly, okay. It was proposed by Lord Lytton in order to prevent the vernacular press from expressing their criticism about the British policies. But keep in mind, this act had actually excluded the English language publication, okay. Under the Vernacular Press Act, any district magistrate or the police commissioner could A. demand security from the printer and publisher of a newspaper, B. forfeit such security, or C. confiscate any printed matter which is considered as objectionable in the interest of the British government. So basically, this act was constituted for the better control of the vernacular press, and it effectively punished and repressed the seditious writings. Okay, moving on to another famous act, that is the Indian Press Act of 1910. Now, the Indian Press Act, which was promulgated in the British India, had imposed strict censorship on all kinds of publications. This act was in fact a revision of the Vernacular Act that empowered the local government to demand a security at registration from the printer or publisher and forfeit or deregister if it was an offending newspaper. And the printer of the newspaper was required to submit at least 2 copies of each issue to the local government. Now, the main instruments of control imposed by this Press Act was the financial securities, which were vulnerable to confiscation in the event of any breach of the exceptionally wide provisions of the legislation. And owners of the press were actually asked to tender security deposits as the magistrate had deemed fit. Now, these securities were to be forfeited if they printed any objectionable matter. Okay, now comes another act, that is the Official Secrets Act of 1923. The Indian Official Secrets Act of 1904 was first enacted during the time of Lord Curzon, the Viceroy of India, from the year 1899 to the year 1905. Now, one of the main purposes of the Act was to muzzle the voice of the nationalist publications. The Indian Official Secrets Act had replaced the earlier Act and was extended to all matters of secrecy and confidentiality in governance in the country. The Official Secrets Act was enacted in the year 1823 and was retained after independence. The law applicable to government servants and citizens provides that the framework for dealing with espionage, sedition, and other potential threats to the integrity of the nation. Now, the law makes spying, sharing secret information, unauthorized use of uniforms, withholding information, interferences with the armed force in prohibited areas, among other punishable offences. Now, if a person was found guilty, then he may get at least up to 14 years of imprisonment or fine or both. The secrecy law basically had two aspects. A. Spying or espionage, which is dealt with in Section 3 of the Act, and B. Disclosure of other secret information of the government, which is dealt with in Section 5. The secret information can be any official code, password, sketch, plan, model, article, note, document, or information. So now I would like to conclude by saying that media laws are those which provides us a wonderful opportunity in order to explore many competing rights and interests in society, as the right to free expression, information, and a free media compete with other important rights including reputation, a fair trial, privacy, confidentiality, intellectual property, and national security. With this, I would like to say thank you very much for listening, for tuning in, and you all have a nice day. Thank you again.
This and other episodes of Radio EduPods, Radio for Learning, are available on Listen to My Radio app at 6 p.m. from Monday to Friday and at 6 a.m. from Tuesday to Saturday. All episodes are available on Sedition TV YouTube channel. Share, like and subscribe Sedition TV, the ultimate learning resource channel.